Yes, I'm going to walk straight out into the roundabout. Oh yeah, feels liberating. Am I going to get hit down? No. So, a couple of things to talk about today really. The first, I'm afraid, is one of the ugliest topics. I mean literally the ugliest topic you could ever think of. And it's Tony Blair. I've also managed to squirrel out I guess some of the more subtle phrases in the repeal bill, which is quite enlightening, so we'll have a look at that as well. But yeah, I'm going to start off with, I'm afraid, rancid, ugly, horrible, evil Tony Blair. Just as usual, I'm going to have to read from my phone in a minute, so I'm going to have to find somewhere a little bit quiet, possibly, because God, man, this church is noisy. Let's first talk about Tony Blair, everyone's favourite human. In fact, a guy who just about everyone, well, I think just about everyone anyway, would probably agree that if there's a human on Earth who deserves to be liquefied and, I don't know, sprayed into space or something, it would be Tony Blair. I mean, most people would probably get into the idea of Tony Blair turning into an atomized particle cloud in outer space, which is why it always strikes me as very curious when suddenly Tony Blair pops up in the news multiple days in a row and he's giving, wizened advice about various things, and people are supposed to take him seriously and trust what he says and, think of him as an honourable statesman or something, though, or one day have a statue of him, or maybe they'll dig up the tomb of the unknown warrior and bury Tony Blair so that heads of state can lay a wreath on such a glorious international figure. But Tony Blair is saying many, many things over the last few days. He's been talking about Jeremy Corbyn, and he says that possibly Jeremy Corbyn can be Prime Minister, will be Prime Minister, is okay if he's Prime Minister. He seems to have changed his tune on that very much. He still calls him basically a left-wing extremist, but he has changed his tune slightly. The main thing Tony Blair's banging on about is he's saying that Brexit does not need to happen, and in fact Brexit could be reversed. He says we have 2 years to try and stop it from happening. It's almost like somebody has set Tony Blair up to be like the leading figurehead of trying to reverse the Brexit decision. But if you ask me, and I'm sure I've said this before, I keep thinking I'm going to get run down. I'm sure I've said this before, but if you got one of the most universally hated figures in the whole of British politics, still living that is, Margaret Thatcher, is it really intelligent if you're actually trying to stop Brexit to have him as the leading vocal figure trying to stop Brexit? If you agree with Tony Blair, say no to Brexit. It seems a bit strange, doesn't it? But Tony Blair, what the fuck are you going to do with him? You can't have him banished from the country because of a thing called freedom, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm just going to place this here, and then we'll go and find somewhere nice and quiet to talk about law. So, you may remember when I was sort of talking about the repeal bill. The repeal bill. I was talking about it before, talking about how they're actually going to be simulating sections of European institutions, things like the European Commission or whatever, in terms of working out how to continue the business model outside of Europe. Apparently, of course, they have to emulate Europe within Britain, which means actually, even though Britain is leaving Europe, supposedly, it'll actually end up being more like Europe than when it was a part of it, because they're sort of emulating it. And obviously they have the ability to change that over the next few years or whatever, but essentially we are becoming Europe by leaving it, which is a little bit odd. And there's a small section, I mean, I'll talk about the actual document afterwards. But let me read you a small section, which is, I think, a key point to do with the whole scam. So I'm pretty sure like a lot of this document is purposefully confusing. I mean, just like a lot of parliamentary stuff. But I mean, this, I'll talk about it in more depth afterwards. But this is just a particular section which I think is very relevant to what I've been talking about, and I think illustrates something in particular. And it goes like this. It's section 7, subsection 5. And it's to do with dealing with deficiencies arising from withdrawal. It says, regulations under this section may, among other things, provide for functions of EU entities or public authorities in member states, including making an instrument of a legislative character or providing funding. So let's shorten that a bit. Provide for functions of EU entities, including funding. So they're going to be funding the simulations of European instruments. That sounds like an amazing way to, one, get more funding from a bank to run your legislative program, and also essentially just funnel more money in towards the state away from the public purse. The repeal bill is in fact a very, very overly complicated document. In fact, it refers to itself so much. I mean, you try and read it. I've read it about twice now. I literally need to read it about 5 more times. But essentially, I mean, it says sort of like, you know, subsection, or you've got the whole preamble, and you've got all the different sections and subsections, and then you've got all of the schedules and all of that kind of stuff. And essentially, like, you start reading one bit, and halfway through a sentence it refers to a completely different section of a 66-page document, and then you read that, and that will then refer to another bit. So in order to actually read an entire clause or an entire paragraph or an entire sentence, you have to be flicking through the pages going, this means this and this means this and that refers to that, which then means this refers to that. It's like almost purposefully confusing. And in a way, I'm interested to see if in fact it is just self-referential, as in it says, well, if this happens, then you must this thing because of this and the other, and then it relies on itself. Almost like one of these like weird continual loops in like a futuristic sci-fi movie when they do time travel. It's almost like a time travel manual is the repeal bill. Still yet all over the papers, all over the TV programs, in every single thing, even in the documentation that is supposed to basically explain it to the public, they refer to it as the Great Repeal Bill, which does not exist at all. Which gives amazing plausible deniability, doesn't it? But yeah, I'm going to have to carry on looking through it. It's really interesting, and obviously people all over the internet are really complaining that, you know, that it's a corrupt law and it shouldn't be passed and all of that kind of stuff. There's still a lot of people who are absolutely damn sure that they're going to be stopping Brexit before it happens. What Tony Blair is essentially trying to provide, or the meme, the core meme that he is trying to spread amongst the public mind, is that the damage to the economy that Brexit is already causing is harsh enough to actually cancel the entire thing and go back on the referendum result. But and it's just caused lots and lots of people. I've been trawling through like Twitter posts and Facebook and all that kind of stuff talking about it. And although they don't really like Tony Blair, what they do actually agree is that, yeah, maybe he's right, that, you know, the damage that's being done, you can see the pound is dropping and prosperity is down or whatever. But I mean, these people got such a short memory. I mean, before Brexit happened at all, the economy wasn't exactly good. In actual fact, do they not remember 2008? Like with the bailouts, like one of the biggest financial crimes in human history took place, basically robbing from the public, giving it to the private sector. Do they not remember that? It's almost like they've got nostalgia for how things used to be before the referendum, as if things were amazingly great. But actually, the way that the financial system is set up, it's determined to never be actually great, because that's the point when they pop the bubble and they milk it in and they take all the money. And that's been happening for so long, it's insane. I mean, even if you look back to the Victorian era, I mean, the people who say things like that, they know nothing about the Victorian era, as in, London was the richest city on earth, had the highest sort of opulent civilization on earth for a while, but it certainly wasn't like that for everybody. It was for the minority. At the time when this was the richest city on earth, it had some of the poorest and most horrible living conditions in the whole of the continent of Europe. And that's how the majority of the population were living in squalor, just like they were in the medieval period, when it was also the same situation, transferring the public worth into private hands. And so, wow, Tony Blair, good at meme spreading, muck spreading, but the factual accuracy of saying that things were so much better before we went to vote out of Europe or whatever, it's bollocks. The economy is never going to be good as long as the same people are still in charge of it. That is how it is designed to work, to milk the ordinary, honest, working public of all of the economies of scale and squirrel it away into private bank accounts offshore, and that's been happening for hundreds of years. So, meme your way around that, Tony Blair, liquidize the guy.